Hello, everyone. This is Professor Sexton with a video lecture on a section of Colson Whitehead's essay, or I'm sorry, from Colson Whitehead's book called City Limits. We're actually going to read and discuss three chapters from this book. So the first one is going to be City Limits. The other two are Subway and JFK. In each segment of this book, what Whitehead does is he writes about different aspects of New York City, but most importantly, he writes about his perspectives on New York City. Now, the essay City Limits, the way that I have included it in the course readings, the font size is rather large. So it seems like the essay is actually longer than what it actually is. And that's my mistake in terms of font size. The essay is not that long. Um, what I want you to do when you're reading Colson Whitehead's City Limits, I want you to do two things in your reading. First of all, read City Limits in terms of what Whitehead is stating, what his viewpoints are, how he presents his view of the city. But also think about your own view of the city. So as you're reading Whitehead's essay and he brings up different points about New York City, I want you to also reflect on your own view on those different things that he brings up. So for this video lecture, I'm not going to go through the essay verbatim. I just want to highlight some of the key points that I thought was important as I read this, reread it because I read this ages ago, but it's also a work that I keep coming back to. Very early on in the essay or the chapter, Whitehead says, or he writes, no matter how long you've been here, you are a New Yorker the first time you say that used to be Muncie's or that used to be the TikTok Lounge. You are a New Yorker when what was there before is more real and solid than what is here now. And I remember the first time that I read that statement, and just to share some personal information with you, I moved to New York in 1998. So I've been here for quite some time, but I do remember maybe in the early 2000s, I remember I was walking around an area of New York City that I used to hang around a lot when I first moved to the city. And I noticed that a building that I knew that I knew as one thing was now something else. And I remember walking there and I thought to myself, I couldn't unsee it as the building that it was when I first saw it. So even though it had changed hands, in my memory, it was still the same company, the same shop. As a matter of fact, I can think of another one. On 42nd Street, there used to be an HMV record store. I don't know if any of you still know what HMV was, but it was an HMV record store. And I spent so much time in that HMV, buying CDs, browsing. I was there. My graduate school was down the street, so I was there like 3 or 4 times a week. I bought numerous CDs, and it formed a really significant part of how I came to understand and live in New York City. And a few years later, it converted to a um, oh, I'm blanking on the name. It's the lingerie store. I don't know why I'm blanking on this. I'm just am, and you probably know the store. And but I still saw it as HMV, and I could never see it as a lingerie store. And then I didn't need to buy lingerie anyway, so I never went inside of it. Um, but for me, still in my mind, it is still HMV. And even now, it's not even the lingerie store. It's an empty building, but still, when I walk past it, I still see it as HMV. And so, one of the things that Whitehead says in his essay is that you become a New Yorker when you can point to what something used to be and you still call it its original name, or you still see it as its original place and not what it is as a new place. He also talks about his first city memory. Where he was looking out of a subway window as the train came into 125th Street. Um, This part of his essay is tricky to me because whenever authors talk about their first memory of a place, I'm a little hesitant because I'm saying, is that really your first experience of the place, or is that the first place that you remember? And so think about it in that way too. I mean, like when I first came to New York City, I came on a Greyhound bus. And so I remember coming across from New Jersey into Port Authority. So my first view of New York City, I saw it at the Port Authority. You know, that was my first view of the city. Um, if you were to ask me what my first memory of the city is, I'm not 100% certain that I would say that. So, in reading this essay, think about differences between the first time you saw the city and your first memory of the city. Now, for those of you who were born here, um, this may even be a more difficult exercise for you because this is home, this is where you were born, and so recounting that first memory of the city might be a little bit more labor intensive for you. um, some of the other things that Whitehead talks about in the essay, he makes a very intriguing point at the bottom of page 3. He writes, never listens to what people tell you about old New York, because if you didn't witness it, it's not a part of your New York. And I thought that was a very interesting comment because New York City is one of those cities that, it's been around forever. There's so many stories, songs, movies, TV shows about New York City. So everybody has a New York. But one of the things that he emphasizes is that whatever their New York is not your New York. And so it kind of speaks to that sense that we all experience the city differently. And he tells you, I mean, in his essay, he said, don't listen to those people. I'm not so sure you should go that far, but maybe what he's trying to imply is don't let your view of the city be swayed by others' people view of the city. Um, so that's one of the things that he mentions in his essay as well. I'm flipping through the essay as I do the lecture here. Um, Another thing that I found interesting about his essay is that he says to consider what your old apartments would say if they got together to swap stories. And this kind of ties into the Kephart essay that we are also talking about in this unit, where Kephart, in her essay, she talked about, how our homes shape us. Whitehead is doing a little bit of the same thing here, talking about your apartments. The places that you've lived and the places that you've lived in New York City. And he asks you, think about if those apartments could tell a story. Um, and what would they say about you? And particularly depending on how long you've been somewhere. As I said before, I moved here in 1998. I was 26 at the time. I'm currently 50. Um, that's a lot of time to live in the city. And so, what he's somewhat implying is that each apartment is seen as at a different stage of our lives. And that apartment can tell a different story about us. Um, he also writes in the essay that our streets are calendars containing who we were and who we will be next. And I also found that very intriguing as well. And I kind of find that intriguing, not just about the essay about New York, but about the small town that I grew up in. I grew up in a small town in the rural South. Um, and that main street that I grew up on, um, that street saw me from the day my parents brought me home from the hospital until I left for college when I was 18. And then I kept going back up until like 2019. That street has seen me in a lot of variations. And so even imagine if that street could talk. It's like, yes, I remember this Danny when he was 5 and this Danny when he was 26. So things of that nature as well. He does also make an interesting point about New York too. At the top of one of the pages, he writes, maybe we become New Yorkers the day we realize that New York will go on without us. And so that kind of sense that New York isn't dependent on us, that even when we're no longer in New York, whether it be when when we're gone or when we leave the city, that the city still continues to be New York, even if we are not there. Um, so there's a lot of things that Whitehead brings up in this essay, a lot of things to reflect on in terms of how, we live in the city, how the city shapes us, um, what it means to be a New Yorker. These are a lot of the things that he brings up. He doesn't give you definite answers to a lot of the questions in this essay, but in a lot of ways, there are things to think about. So as you're reading this essay, two things that I want you to do. Um, think about the things that Whitehead talks about in the essay, but also think about how those things that he talks about in the essay reflects your own experiences of living in the city, which you all do. Um, or so I think. So I hope you find the Whitehead City Limits essay an interesting read. And I look forward to hearing your own individual, unique perspectives on your life in the city. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.